It's just a science project.
Silent breed is people!
You know, a doctor friend once said the same thing to me. Frankenstein was his name.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
That sounds like something out of science fiction.
Please explain to me the scientific nature of the whammy.
We live in a spaceship, dear. So?
Yes, science!
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Hello and welcome to episode 238 of Science on Top for Sunday the 14th of July 2016. I'm Ed Brown and I'm joined by Dr. Shane Joseph.
G'day.
And Penny Dumsday.
Hello.
And coming up, indestructible headlice, a new treatment for parasitic infections, and why we might one day be drinking a long glass of ice-cold cockroach milk. But let's start off with the Olympics. And once again, American superfish Michael Phelps has won enough gold to build his own Trump Tower. And this year, people have noticed that he and a number of other swimmers are sporting big round bruises. Not the results of a giant squid attack, these are cupping marks, an alternative medicine practice that involves sucking the skin up into a cup. So, Shane, does it work?
No.
Well,
End of story. No, it's actually more complicated than that.
Isn't it always?
Now, I actually first noticed this cupping phenomenon. I follow a few bodybuilders and things like that on Instagram because, you know, I do a bit of weightlifting and I like to just follow this sort of stuff. I noticed one guy in particular was talking about this cupping thing. I'm like, what is this? And I looked into it a bit and I thought, well, this sounds like a bit like, you know, well, I won't say what I actually said out loud and what I thought about this, but basically it seems to be a so-called ancient Chinese therapeutic, where the idea some people say different things. Some people say that, you know, it breaks the capillaries and therefore eases muscle soreness. There's other things floating around like it, you know, draws toxins out of your muscles and gets into the skin and whatever. The point is that it's been around for a little while. It's just that it's become really quite... Well, first of all, apparently Gwyneth Paltrow first did it. Of course she did, because she's Gwyneth
So you
Paltrow.
know it must work.
Yeah. She sported, you know, she was wearing a lovely dress at some award ceremony, and they noticed all these bruises down her, you know, back and things like that. And she said, "Oh, I'm into cupping, and it's this beautiful natural therapeutic, blah blah blah." And now that Michael Phelps is doing it as well, and he's obviously, you know, all you see of this man is his torso, so it's very, very noticeable. And apparently he's been doing it for a little while now, because there's a picture of him getting the therapy done. That's about a year old from his Instagram page. So the important thing is that there have apparently been reports that people who've had the therapy do report decrease in soreness of muscles. The problem with this whole thing is that you can't test for this in a rigorous way, because it's
a subjective thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I'm thinking, like, in most clinical trials, you'll have groups that will receive, you know, the medication, and they'll receive other medication, and then they'll receive a control pill. So that way you test for the placebo effect. There is no way to test for the placebo effect here, because you can't placebo a cup. You know what I mean? Like, you can't... You can't persuade someone to getting this therapy without them getting it. So there is no way to test if this is psychological or not.
Yeah.
And you could argue that this is not particularly harmful, that, you know, if it doesn't seem to work, but it seems to have some sort of a psychological effect, then maybe that's okay. Now, that's the way that a lot of news outlets have reported it. They're very skeptical about it, but they're like, what's the harm in doing it? Then
I don't even know if they're very skeptical. I see most of the time they might mention that there's no evidence of it, but they'll still gloss over that. Most of the time they say, and Phelps is doing this because it will help him with this. I don't get that much skepticism in the reports that I saw.
Skepticism is probably the wrong... I mean, look, certainly the links that you've sent us about this are...
I only send you the good stuff.
Okay, so... No, you're right. I've read a few other articles, like from, you know, I think our local, like The Age and things like that, that are extremely, you know, oh, look at this, you know, wonderful new technique, which is... It seems to have pretty much the same sort of effect as a lot of these so-called ancient Chinese remedies like acupuncture, probably Reiki massage, that kind of thing. You know, it's probably... At the very least, it doesn't seem to be that different to those, and in fact that it might mostly be psychological. Now, I read this one link that, again, Ed sent us, which is very scathing, and it's from a scientific blog. Where is it?
Was that the one from Stephen Novella?
Quite
The one
possibly.
by
I'm trying
Orac.
to find it.
Oh no, it was by Orac on Science Box.
Here we go, yeah. I mean, the headline is, "Thanks, Michael Phelps, for glamorizing cupping quackery." Now, that that tells you all you need to know in terms of like what he thinks about it. Now, I didn't realise this, but apparently there have been cases where cupping has led to necrosis of the skin.
Yeah.
Which we'll put this link up later for all you people who are interested. Anyway, and apparently there is now. I'm not sure how common this is, or if this is something that happens in certain people, but apparently this can lead to necrosis of the skin, which is something that I've not seen reported anywhere else.
No, it's very rare, and it's usually if it's repeated on the same areas over a long period of time, it can happen.
Okay.
Basically, you're breaking capillaries, you're getting blood exposed to the air, and it gets infected, so you get some blood poisoning of some description.
Yeah. Okay. So,
but it's really nasty when it happens,
Yeah,
like in the photo that Orac posted.
So now I think that the tack that Orac seems to be taking here is that, okay, you might not think it's very harmful, but it's basically useless. A and B. What worries me, I suppose, is this. I'm guessing this is something that's not exactly cheap. This would be a so-called specialised kind of therapy. So if people go and get this done thinking that it will help them, and it doesn't actually help them much at all, they're spending money essentially on nothing.
Sure.
And that's
not so much an issue when you've got the amount of money spent on Michael Phelps, I'm sure.
But I'm talking about the layperson who sees this and goes, "Ooh, I might try this."
Yeah.
And that's the issue. Well, that's one of the issues I see anyway.
No, I agree. Also, everyone talks about it being an ancient Chinese thing. It's actually not. It was. There are records of Hippocrates mentioning it, mentioning wet cupping. Wet cupping is the same as cupping, but it's when you make a small incision in the skin first, and you suck the blood up.
Oh,
through
you're
that.
sucking blood out from the point. Oof.
Yeah, which is even more risky from a health point of view. But that supposedly somehow only draws out the toxins. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those too good to be true things, really. I mean, when you think about it, look, if it has the same effect as a massage in that you're stimulating blood flow to certain areas, then I can see how it would work. But if you can get the same effect by having a massage, then I'd prefer the massage. Just saying.
Sure. But then, of course, when you're talking sports, and particularly at this level, there's a few other things involved. You mentioned, I think, the placebo effect, which is the fact that I've had this done and I know that this is supposed to help me and I feel better because I've done that. And I don't feel like there's anything that I've left to chance. I've done the cupping, I'm ready sort of thing. So that's a mental psych-up thing as well as a kind of a superstitious ritual type thing. It's also, I think, a little bit of it is intimidation. If you walk out into the marshalling area showing all these cupping things and people who haven't heard of it see the number one athlete in the world in this case who's wearing all these bruises, like what the hell does he know that I don't? What's he done that I haven't done? And you doubt yourself, and that's the worst thing you can do. You lose that confidence. That's the nature of that level of competition, is that you'll do anything to give you that slight advantage.
Which is ironic considering that the Olympics is supposed to be an amateur sport.
That goes into, and I don't know this too well to go into it, but it was amateur in the sense that these were not professional people. They didn't have jobs and trades. They were the gentlemen who didn't have professions. Not so much that, we're getting paid for it or we're not. So.
Well, I know they don't get paid for it, but I always thought that the idea that you had, for example, your Premier League soccer players going and playing for England. I always thought that's a bit strange if it's supposed to be a amateur sport. But yeah,
well, that's the historical distinction. Obviously, things have been blurred a lot nowadays, but I think it's interesting. And I think, as you say, that the risk is that people are going to see people doing the cupping, and celebrities, of course, for some reason, a celebrity doing it means that it must be something good for everyone else. And we always put that much authority in someone just because they're famous.
I mean, as I said,
or in his case, very good.
Well, as I said, I first saw this on an Instagram page. This guy, he's just an amateur, but he does proper weightlifting, like snatches and cleans and jerks. I think he's a very low weight limit, like he's like 62 kilos or something like that. But he does these, he lifts some quite impressive weights, and he gets all these injuries. And I'm like, well, you're getting injuries, dude, because you're lifting 3 times your body weight above your head, and cupping is not going to actually help that.
No,
just quietly, but whatever.
But we still, I mean, apart from the very few cases of necrosis and all that, it is relatively safe.
Yeah.
And if it relaxes you and makes you feel better, who are we to say don't do it? But you could probably get better results and cheaper results from just a straight-up massage. All right. Well, let's move on to some killer parasitic infections. Chagas disease, leishmaniasis, and sleeping sicknesses. They're all diseases caused by a parasitic infection, but promising results in animal trials suggest these can all be treated, possibly even cured, with one relatively safe drug. Penny, this is really good news.
This is good news, especially because these 3 diseases infect, or the 3 parasites infect 20 million people and kill 50,000 each year.
Jeez.
However, these people are quite poor. And
brown?
Well, poor and brown, which is not a combination that inspires drug companies to do very expensive kind of R&D. However, they have. So, yay, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's much more complex geopolitical sort of issues, but to me, this seems good. And
thank you, Novartis, for all your good work.
I'm not even going to go there. But what I found interesting, because I don't, I'm not an expert in medical research or anything or pharma stuff, but just this description of the development process for these drugs. So this is, again, for sleeping sickness, Chagas disease, and leishmaniasis.
Yep.
So these 3 parasites. So to do this, 3 million different compounds were tested. So to find those that could kill multiples. And they found one that was the most effective, modified it thousands of times to make it more potent.
Wow.
And that just blows my mind, 3 million, no matter how you're doing it. That's big. That's a huge research effort.
That's a long PhD.
It's like an army of PhDs I'm getting.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this compound is able to treat the 3 kinds of infections in mice. It's not obvious if this is going to be, in the end, the most effective way, to treat these, because they are in the infections occur in different parts of the body, so it's not so much the compound as well as how they get delivered and so on. But it certainly seems, it's going to start human trials if it's shown to be safe. So hopefully something really good comes out of it.
It's certainly promising, because I gather the current drugs that are used for these sort of treatments are really kind of toxic and dangerous to use, and the side effects can be quite horrific as well. So
yeah, and they also they're expensive, and they need to be given by intravenous drip, which is, I guess, not always really accessible in all regions.
Well, so presumably this can be taken
safely.
This can be taken as a pill or something, presumably. Then.
Well, I guess it's not even at that stage yet, but something new, who knows what it could do.
Yeah. Very cool. But I want to talk about cockroach milk. So let's move on.
Don't we all?
Because an international team of scientists have found that the liquid found in the brood sacs of a particular type of cockroach is a highly nutritious source of protein. Shane, could we one day be feeding our babies cockroach milk?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say no.
Oh.
Well, not.
That was a buzzkill.
Not from milking a cockroach. I mean, this is an interesting.
You need very tiny hands.
Well, yes, and a lot of cockroaches. Well, first of all, what is interesting about this is that it's actually from a viviparous cockroach, which aren't very common. That viviparous being giving birth to live young, which is not very common in the insect world, let alone the cockroach world. But it's a Hawaiian cockroach. I think it's called the Pacific beetle cockroach. I think it's found in Hawaii, but other Asian Pacific islands as well. And it gives birth to live young. And they feed their young with a kind of a milk. And apparently the equivalent amount of cockroach milk contains 3 times the amount of nutrient as that found in dairy milk. Now that's all good and that's all fine, but so a mill of cockroach milk is 3 times better than a mill of cow's milk. But the problem is that it's very easy to get cow's milk, and it's very hard to get 1 mill of cockroach milk. When you think about it, I mean, the way they've harvested this is apparently inserting filter paper into the brood sac in the absence of an embryo, and then the milk gets produced, and then they pull the filter paper out, and that's how they harvest.
So the cockroach thinks it's pregnant.
Yep.
But it doesn't. It's just got a filter paper.
But it's just got a filter paper up its clacker, so it then produces this milk. Now, and that's okay. So it's highly nutritious, but it's a scaling problem. It's a huge scaling problem. So no, I don't think we're going to be seeing cockroach milk on our shelves anytime in the future, unless we find some way to make it through biotech, which I suppose is possible. Apparently, they're trying to get yeast to make it.
Yeah. And we've sort of talked before about, I think it was getting yeast to synthesize, was it cocaine or heroin or something?
Oh.
But I
can't remember.
I don't even know if you were on that episode. But there is that idea that if you can genetically modify something like yeast or bacteria even to produce a certain compound, you can industrialize that. You can scale that up to huge vats, which is presumably the next step in this sort of research, and maybe that's somewhere that we might end up going.
I mean, what's interesting about this as well is that apparently it's tasteless. So, of course, some enterprising scientist on this woman's research team. Now, what's this researcher called?
Now there are two
Barbara
different
Stray.
ones.
Well, there's Barbara Stray from the University of Iowa, and there's another one, as you said.
It was Subramanian Ramaswamy at the Institute for Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine in Bangalore, India.
Okay. So that's the international team then, yeah.
And I think it was someone on her team, or his team, who tasted it and said that it tasted like nothing. So
of course there would be an enterprising scientist who'd be like, I wonder what that tastes like. Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Oh, come on. Curiosity is at the heart of science.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, the other thing is that this particular researcher has said, yeah, okay, it tastes okay, as in it tastes of nothing. You could theoretically sort of sprinkle this on your cornflakes or whatever, and to get your energy boost. But there is actually no evidence that it's actually safe for human consumption at the moment. Anyway, I mean, what's interesting about it is it's like a crystalline. The natural form is in crystals. So apparently that way it's basically like a sort of a time release thing. Like as it dissolves, that's how you release the energy. So yeah, okay. I mean, it's interesting. Like, it's very interesting. Academically, this is interesting. I had no idea that certain cockroaches were viviparous and that they produced a milk.
Yeah. So,
just on its own, this is interesting. Whether or not it will be useful for us, who knows? I don't know.
We can live in hope.
That we'll one day be drinking cockroach milk.
Oh, why not? We'll one day probably be eating cockroaches. So
don't remind me of this. Seriously. We've been through this before.
Yeah.
Or maybe one day we'll be eating headlice. Now, no one likes headlice, and I think every parent... See, you like that, eh? I think every parent who's had a kid in primary school has received a letter saying there's an outbreak of lice going around, so wash your kid's head in something nasty. And like all pests, head lice evolve, and they're becoming resistant to the common insecticides we usually use. So, Penny, is there any hope in sight? He asks knowingly.
You ask knowingly. Well, hopefully there is. I think anyone, I don't know about you guys, but as I was researching this story, my head started to feel quite itchy. So head lice is not life-threatening. It's not particularly, it's not going to cause, for most people, any kind of ongoing thing. It's irritating, but they don't do much else. They don't spread horrible diseases, but they are so contagious. So if someone has them, everyone's probably going to get them unless you get onto it straight away. And there's kinds of insecticides that we've used quite commonly to get rid of head lice, but as astute listeners will have learned by now, natural selection works, and head lice are becoming resistant to these insecticides, which is sort of annoying because I think when you can just nuke something with a compound, it's quite a simple way to get rid of things. And it seems like more than 98% of head lice might be resistant now.
Jeez.
So, yeah, which is annoying, but luckily there's quite a good solution, and I suspect this is the kind of solution we're going to have to come across for a lot of things. Just a mechanical solution. So, conditioner and a comb.
What do you mean by mechanical?
Like just movement rather than a chemical, just a physical sort of solution. Just get rid of the lice. So, rather than bombing a field with insecticide, maybe or herbicide, maybe people are going to have to go and weed it. Rather than bombing your head or your child's head with insecticide, you get conditioner and a lice comb.
Oh, seriously?
Or maybe just cut the hair off. Anyway.
Yeah. That's how I do it.
Yeah, that's my approach too. I don't think everyone is that keen on the full shave method.
However, I'm also not keen on brushing a toddler's hair. So, you know.
Fair point.
Yeah, just get the razor out. Done.
But yeah, anyway, so luckily for this one, it's not a terrible problem. There is a very effective solution.
Mm-hmm.
But it did make me think. I'm like, yeah, you know what? We're going to have to go old school for a lot of things because this sort of Red Queen kind of arms race against stuff we don't want, weeds and lice and bugs, is just not going to be able to go on forever. We're running out of...
Yeah, it's the same old story. But, I was a bit concerned, and the reason I sounded worried when you were saying that there was a mechanical solution, I thought you were talking like some sort of machine that you put your head in and it, I don't know, scrapes them out or something. It's like, but no, you just mean a comb. Okay.
A comb, yeah. Like a simple kind of machine.
Actually using old school methods like elbow grease to
Yeah.
get this out. Or, nipping into the bud and shaving a kid's head. Which,
Although maybe you should invent that machine, Ed.
It'll be based on the haircut machine from Wayne's World. It just sucks the hair up and
it certainly does suck. Oh dear. I watched that movie way too many times as a kid. I still remember every line.
It is a very good movie, and I don't think there is
I wouldn't
too
go
many
that
times.
far.
Oh yes, it is. It's a classic. So many quotable lines. The sphincter says what?
Dear.
Which I think means it's about time to end this show. If you want any information about the stories we talked about, check out the website, scienceontop.com/238. Leave us a comment, get in touch with us on social media. Of course, you can email us, feedback@scienceontop.com. And leave us a review on iTunes. We haven't had one for a while, and we always appreciate your feedback. Thank you, Penny and Shane.
Thanks, Ed.
No worries.
This episode was edited with grace and ingenuity by Marcos Benamu. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back again next week, putting science on top of the agenda. Join us then.
Michael Phelps arriving poolside brandishing a bunch of bruises that left Americans guessing. On Twitter, Michael Phelps probably just fell asleep on his medals. Those giant spots, the result of a therapy technique called cupping, to loosen muscles and encourage blood flow. American swimmer Dana Vollmer, who won 2 medals last night, routinely relies on cupping, just not before competitions.
I personally don't like walking out looking like I've been attacked by an octopus.
This ancient Chinese tradition perhaps now helping a modern American one, winning.